It was a cold winter morning in Orchard Park, New York. Assia Zubair left her home, like she had many times before, and walked into the office of Bridges TV, the network she and her husband had once built together. She believed she was just there to sign some papers and finish some work. What she didn't know was that her husband, Muzamil Hassan, was waiting inside, not with documents, but with a deadly plan. Within minutes of entering the building, Assia was gone. Police say the crime was brutal, unlike anything they had ever seen. Assia had been killed and then beheaded. The man who committed this act was the same man who had once stood beside her, smiling for cameras, speaking about love, peace, and the positive image of Muslims in America. He had fooled everyone. What the public saw was a successful businessman and community leader. But behind closed doors, Assia lived a very different life, one filled with fear, control, and emotional pain. For years, she tried to make the marriage work. She kept quiet for the sake of her children, but when she could no longer take the abuse, she found the strength to leave. She filed for divorce. She got a court order to keep him away. She was trying to protect herself and her kids. She was finally breaking free. But he couldn't handle losing control, and in one terrible moment, he took everything from her. Her voice, her future, her life. This story is not just about one crime. It's about how abuse can hide behind smiles. It's about how power and respect can be used to cover up pain. And it's about a woman who tried to do everything right, but still ended up paying the highest price. Her name was Assia Zubair. Welcome to the crime series. Before we begin, do us a quick favor. Drop your location and the time you're watching this in the comments. We want to know where you're tuning in from, because these stories matter everywhere. Like this video, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a case. Assia Zubair was born on June 17, 1972 in Pakistan. She grew up in Karachi as one of 4 siblings from a very close-knit and accomplished family. Her father was a civil engineer, and her mother had a degree in psychology. Her parents had moved from India to Pakistan for better opportunities since Muslims faced discrimination in their homeland. The family prioritized education. All children attended private schools, finished college, and pursued professional careers. Assia was fun, daring, hardworking, and brilliant, with a giving and optimistic nature that attracted friends wherever she went. She brought energy and entertainment to every gathering. During frequent power outages in Pakistani households, Assia and her father would sing songs together, joking that their terrible voices might convince God to restore electricity just to make them stop. These moments reflected the close family bonds that sustained her throughout her life. Assia pursued diverse interests with enthusiasm. She took swimming lessons, learned musical instruments, rode speedboats, and became an accomplished horsewoman. After finishing architecture school, she bought her own horse. Assia studied architecture in Pakistan, a field combining creative vision with technical expertise. During her studies, she demonstrated remarkable innovation and creativity. In one student presentation, she designed a portable restroom that collapsed into a 2-by-2-foot box, but opened into a complete shower and toilet facility with water storage. The presentation impressed both her classmates and professors, who suggested she patent the design. After graduation, seasoned colleagues regarded her as their professional equal. Pakistan in the 1990s offered opportunities for talented architects as the country developed its infrastructure and modernized its cities. Meanwhile, in America, Muzamil Syed Hassan was building his own professional trajectory. Born on May 26, 1964, at 17 years old, Hassan left Pakistan for America in 1981, joining the wave of Pakistani students seeking higher education in the United States. The reasons for his departure and the circumstances that brought him to America at such a young age are not fully documented, but like many Pakistani immigrants of that era, he likely came seeking better educational and economic opportunities. Hassan enrolled at the University of Rochester in New York State, graduating in 1985. The transition from Pakistan to America represented a significant cultural shift for the young man. University of Rochester provided him with the foundation for what would become a successful business career, though those who knew him noted personality traits that would later prove troubling. After completing his undergraduate degree, Hassan remained in America and entered the business world. He worked in sales for major corporations, first at Procter & Gamble, then moving to Clorox in Oakland, California. These positions gave him experience in corporate America and helped him develop the business acumen that would later serve him in banking and media ventures. While working for Clorox in California, Hassan met his first wife, an American-born woman. The relationship represented his first serious attempt at building a life in his adopted country. Together, they had 2 children who would later be known as Michael and Sonia. However, the marriage was troubled from the beginning, marked by Hassan's controlling and increasingly violent behavior. Those who knew Hassan during this period described him as intelligent and ambitious, someone who could present a successful professional facade. However, beneath this exterior, disturbing patterns were already emerging. He demonstrated angry and violent attempts to control his relationships, behavior that would escalate over time. The first marriage ended in divorce, with his wife filing on grounds of severe domestic violence and abuse. The failure of this relationship prompted Hassan to return to Rochester, where he had attended university. This pattern of relationship failure, followed by geographical relocation, would repeat throughout his life. Back in Rochester, Hassan continued building his professional credentials. He enrolled in the William E. Simon Graduate School of Business Administration at the University of Rochester, where he excelled academically, graduating magna cum laude with his MBA in 1996. His academic success demonstrated his intellectual capabilities and helped establish the respectable professional image he cultivated. Hassan's educational achievements opened doors in the financial sector. He became a successful banker, eventually securing a position at M&T Bank in Buffalo, New York. His colleagues saw him as intelligent and driven, though some noted an intense personality that occasionally surfaced in professional settings. Despite his professional success, Hassan's personal life remained turbulent. Hassan entered a second marriage with a Pakistani-American Muslim woman named Sadia. This relationship lasted only 13 months, ending in divorce when Sadia filed on the same grounds as his first wife: severe domestic violence and abuse. The brevity of this marriage suggested that Hassan's abusive patterns were becoming more quickly apparent to his victims. The Pakistani-American community in Western New York was relatively small, and word of Hassan's failed marriages began to circulate. However, community dynamics often worked to protect Hassan's reputation rather than address the clear pattern of abuse. By the time Hassan reached his mid-30s, he had established himself as a successful banker with impressive credentials and professional achievements. To outsiders, he appeared to embody the American dream, a Pakistani immigrant who had worked his way up through education and hard work to achieve financial success. However, beneath this successful exterior lay a man with a documented history of domestic violence, untreated mental health issues, and an inability to maintain healthy relationships. His intelligence and professional success had helped him conceal these darker aspects of his personality, allowing him to continue seeking new victims who were unaware of his past. The stage was set for Hassan's most devastating relationship when he began courting Asiya Zubair. Through networks that connected Pakistani expatriates with potential spouses in their homeland, Hassan began corresponding with Asiya Zubair in Pakistan. For a successful banker living in America, finding an educated Pakistani wife represented both personal and cultural fulfillment. Asiya, accomplished in her own right as an architect, appeared to be an ideal match. The courtship proceeded through traditional channels. Hassan presented himself as a caring, successful businessman who had achieved the American dream. His professional credentials and financial stability made him an attractive prospect for a Pakistani family seeking opportunities for their daughter in America. Asiya's family saw the marriage as a promising union with an established professional. In October 2000, Asiya Zubair and Muzammil Hassan married in Pakistan. The wedding ceremony was attended by both families and represented what appeared to be a successful match between two educated professionals. For Asiya, the marriage meant leaving behind her architectural career, her family, and everything familiar to start a new life in America. After the wedding, Asiya relocated to Orchard Park, New York, a well-to-do suburb of Buffalo where Hassan had established his life. The transition was dramatic, from the bustling, diverse environment of Karachi to a predominantly white, suburban American community where she knew no one except her new husband. Hassan continued his work at M&T Bank, while Asiya began operating a 7-Eleven franchise in Orchard Park. The convenience store business provided her with income and a connection to the local community, though it represented a significant departure from her architectural training. She had no other family in the country and was entirely dependent on Hassan for her place in American society. The early signs of trouble began almost immediately. Hassan's controlling behavior, which had ended his previous marriages, quickly emerged in his relationship with Asiya. However, isolated from her family and support system, she was in a more vulnerable position than his previous wives had been. Despite the private difficulties, Asiya adapted to American life with determination. She interacted warmly with customers at the 7-Eleven, learning about American culture while sharing aspects of her own background. The couple's first child was born in 2001, followed by a second child. Asiya now found herself managing the demands of new motherhood while operating a business and dealing with an increasingly controlling husband. She also took on the role of stepmother to Hassan's two children from his first marriage, Michael and Sonia, who were then teenagers. During this period, America was grappling with the aftermath of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. Muslim Americans faced unprecedented scrutiny, prejudice, and negative stereotyping. The attacks had created a hostile environment for Muslims living in America, with many experiencing discrimination and suspicion from their neighbors and communities. It was during a trip to Detroit, while Asiya was pregnant with her first child, that she observed the negative attitudes toward Muslims firsthand. She suggested to her husband that America could benefit from a television station that would provide greater insight into the American Muslim community and culture. The idea was born from her genuine desire to bridge cultural divides and create understanding. Hassan immediately recognized the business potential of his wife's concept. He began developing the idea, publicly crediting Asiya as the inspiration behind what would become Bridges TV. The couple started working on the project from their basement in Orchard Park, with Hassan handling the business development while Asiya contributed her vision and programming ideas. The early years of developing the television network were intensive. Hassan used his business connections and fundraising skills to court investors and cable companies. Asiya provided the heart and vision of the project, understanding intuitively what American Muslim families needed to see reflected in the media. By 2003, their planning and fundraising efforts were gaining momentum. They had secured financial backing from investors and were moving closer to launching what would become the first American Muslim English-language television network. The fundraising process involved reaching out to Muslim American communities across the country. Hassan and Asiya traveled extensively, presenting their vision to potential investors and subscribers. They secured backing from 50 investors and convinced 10,000 subscribers to pay advance fees, demonstrating the hunger for this type of programming in Muslim American communities. They located their headquarters in suburban Buffalo, establishing offices in Orchard Park. The choice of location was strategic. Buffalo offered lower costs than major media markets, while still providing access to production facilities and talent. The couple rented studio space at WNED Television and began building their network from the ground up. Bridges TV officially launched on November 15, 2004, with Hassan as CEO and Asiya as general manager. The programming mix included family-oriented shows, news programs, cultural documentaries, and children's programming. Everything was designed to show Muslim Americans as normal people living regular lives: parents, professionals, students, and community members. The network gained significant media attention from major outlets including Variety, NBC News, and Voice of America. The concept resonated with both Muslim and non-Muslim audiences who recognized the need for more diverse voices in American media. Even world heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali became a subscriber and spokesperson, saying, "Bridges TV gives American Muslims a voice of their own on the airwaves for Americans of all races and religions to hear." The early years were challenging but promising. Market research showed American Muslims were willing to pay as much as $10 per month above their current cable fees for the channel. The network was available on satellite and was working to expand to cable systems across the country. While Bridges TV was gaining national attention and praise, the private life of its co-founders was becoming increasingly troubled. Asia's marriage to Muzammil Hassan was marked by escalating patterns of abuse that she worked desperately to hide from public view. The abuse began subtly but grew progressively worse. Hassan controlled Asia's finances, limiting her access to money and requiring her to account for every expenditure. He monitored her communications and movements, making it difficult for her to maintain relationships outside their marriage. This isolation is a classic pattern in domestic violence, separating victims from potential sources of help and support. Physical violence became a regular part of their relationship. Hassan would strike Asia, sometimes in front of the children, creating an atmosphere of fear throughout their household. The children, both their own and Hassan's from his previous marriage, witnessed this violence repeatedly. Michael and Sonia Hassan, his older children, would later testify about the terror they felt during these incidents. One particularly disturbing incident involved Hassan causing Asia to miscarry by dragging and sitting on her while she was pregnant. This act represented not just physical violence but the destruction of their unborn child, a level of brutality that demonstrated his complete disregard for Asia's well-being and their family's future. Hassan's psychological abuse was equally damaging. He would manipulate Asia's emotions, alternating between charm and cruelty in ways that kept her off balance and dependent on his approval. He used her immigration status and isolation from her family as tools of control, reminding her that she was dependent on him for her place in America. The controlling behavior extended to her appearance and behavior. Hassan dictated what Asia could wear, where she could go, and whom she could speak with. At work, colleagues noticed that Asia seemed subdued around her husband, and some observed that she had stopped wearing her hijab without explanation, possibly because Hassan was controlling even her religious expression. Despite the abuse, Asia was building her own identity and strength. She enrolled in the University at Buffalo's Executive MBA program in 2007, working toward a degree that would give her financial independence. This decision represented both hope and danger. While education offered a path to freedom, Hassan saw it as a threat to his control over her. The household lived in constant tension. Hassan's older children, Michael and Sonia, grew close to Asia and saw her as a protective presence in their lives. They urged her repeatedly to leave their father, understanding better than most adults the danger of remaining in the relationship. As Bridges TV grew in prominence, the couple was forced to maintain a public facade of success and happiness. They attended community events together, gave interviews about their shared vision, and presented themselves as partners, building something meaningful. The contrast between their public image and private reality became increasingly difficult for Asia to maintain. The Buffalo community that surrounded Bridges TV began to notice troubling signs about Muzammil Hassan's behavior, though many failed to recognize them as indicators of serious domestic violence. Colleagues, neighbors, and law enforcement all encountered evidence of the brewing crisis, but systemic failures prevented effective intervention. Paul Moskal, who had served as chief counsel for the FBI in Buffalo, became friendly with the couple through his work with Bridges TV. He participated in forums aired on the network that were designed to improve understanding between Muslim Americans and law enforcement. Despite this close professional relationship, Moskal admitted he never heard Hassan raise his voice, saying his personal life kind of betrayed what he tried to portray publicly. This observation highlights one of the most dangerous aspects of domestic violence: the abuser's ability to maintain a carefully crafted public persona while terrorizing their victims in private. Hassan was skilled at presenting himself as a successful, moderate businessman while hiding his violent behavior from professional associates. At Bridges TV, staff members began trading stories about Hassan's behavior. Nancy Sanders, who served as news director for 2.5 years, remembered disturbing incidents that painted a picture of Hassan's controlling and potentially violent nature. She recalled him asking her to move her feet during her job interview so he wouldn't see her legs, and his refusal to let women enter his office unless his wife was present, behaviors that suggested deep-seated issues with women and control. More alarming were the stories about Hassan's violent behavior toward Asiya. Co-workers shared accounts of Hassan running his wife's car off the road while their 2 young children were inside the vehicle. This incident demonstrated not only his willingness to endanger Asiya, but also his disregard for the safety of their children. The most telling warning signs came through official channels. Orchard Park police had responded to domestic violence calls at the Hassan residence multiple times over the years. These calls created a paper trail that documented the escalating danger in the household, yet no arrests were ever made. On New Year's Day, 2007, Hassan abandoned Asiya's car at a clearance dealership so that she could not leave the residence following a domestic dispute. This calculated move demonstrated his willingness to use any means necessary to control her movements and prevent her escape. The police had served multiple orders of protection on Hassan. Each order represented Asiya's attempt to seek legal protection from her husband's violence. Yet the pattern continued to escalate despite official intervention. Medical professionals and child protective services were also aware of problems in the Hassan household. Asiya's injuries required medical attention on multiple occasions, creating records that documented Hassan's physical violence. The impact on the children was also becoming apparent, with Hassan's eldest son bearing a facial scar from a punch to his nose by his stepfather. Despite all these warning signs, police reports, medical records, witness accounts, and protective orders, the system failed to protect Asiya. By 2008, Asiya Hassan had reached a breaking point. After years of escalating abuse, she began taking concrete steps toward independence and safety, though each move toward freedom increased the danger she faced from her increasingly desperate husband. Her enrollment in the University at Buffalo's executive MBA program represented more than academic achievement. It was a strategic move toward financial independence. Asiya understood that education was her path to freedom, giving her the credentials and knowledge needed to support herself and her children without relying on Muzamil. The MBA program required significant time and effort, which Hassan resented and tried to sabotage. He viewed her education as a threat to his control and became increasingly hostile about her studies. Despite his opposition, Asiya persevered, attending classes and completing assignments while managing her responsibilities at Bridges TV and caring for their children. As her education progressed, Asiya began building a support network and documenting the abuse she endured. She started photographing her injuries after violent incidents, creating evidence that would later be crucial in her divorce proceedings. This documentation demonstrated both her growing awareness of her legal options and her systematic approach to building a case for leaving the marriage. Asiya also began setting aside money secretly, saving $50 per week for an entire year to purchase a professional trumpet for her stepdaughter Sonia. This act demonstrated both her love for the children and her ability to manage finances independently, skills that would be essential for life after divorce. The decision to file for divorce was not made lightly. Asia understood the risks involved, having witnessed Hassan's explosive reactions to perceived challenges to his authority. She also knew that statistically, the period after leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time for victims of domestic violence. To protect herself, Asia purchased a separate phone that Hassan couldn't monitor, allowing her to communicate privately with her lawyer and family members. This phone became a lifeline, enabling her to coordinate her escape plan without Hassan's knowledge. She also began reaching out to her family for support. Her sister Asma Furfiri in South Africa became a crucial confidant, though the distance made practical assistance impossible. These conversations provided emotional support and helped Asia maintain connections to her life before the marriage. The divorce petition, when finally filed on February 6, 2009, cited violence and inhuman treatment as the grounds for dissolution of the marriage. The legal document detailed years of abuse and included photographic evidence of Hassan's violence. Police reports indicated that Asia stated her husband's abusive and controlling behavior had begun at least 6 years earlier. Along with the divorce petition, Asia secured an order of protection that required Hassan to stay away from their home. This legal protection represented her first successful attempt to establish physical boundaries between herself and her abuser. The protective order was served on Hassan at the Bridges TV offices on February 6, creating a public record of the domestic violence that had been hidden for years. Colleagues and employees witnessed the service of papers, making the private crisis suddenly visible to their professional community. That same evening, Hassan violated the protective order by appearing at their home on Big Tree Road. Asia called the police, and Hassan was served with an additional restraining order. His immediate violation of the legal boundaries demonstrated both his disregard for authority and the escalating danger Asia faced. For 6 precious days, the Hassan family experienced something they had never known: peace. With Hassan legally barred from their home, the atmosphere changed dramatically. Sonia Hassan later remembered this period as the first time our house felt like a home. The house was lighter. We were smiling. We were laughing. We finally felt comfortable. The morning of February 12, 2009, began like any other day for Asia Hassan, though she couldn't have known it would be her last. 6 days had passed since she filed for divorce and obtained the protective order against Muzamil, and for the first time in years, her home felt safe and peaceful. Asia had been building a new routine during these days of freedom. Without Hassan's presence, the children were more relaxed, and she could move through her daily activities without the constant tension that had marked their married life. She was continuing her MBA studies and managing her responsibilities at Bridges TV, though the protective order meant she and Hassan couldn't be in the building at the same time. During the day, Asia spoke with her sister Asma Furfiri in South Africa. This conversation would become crucial evidence in understanding what happened that evening. The sisters discussed Asia's divorce proceedings and her plans for the future. For the first time in years, Asia was expressing hope about her life and looking forward to independence. Hassan, meanwhile, was experiencing his own crisis. The protective order had forced him out of his home, and the divorce proceedings threatened to expose his years of abuse publicly. His carefully constructed image as a successful businessman and community leader was crumbling. The financial pressures on Bridges TV were mounting, and losing control of both his marriage and his business empire was devastating to his self-image. Around 5:10 p.m., surveillance cameras at a Walmart store in Hamburg, New York, captured Hassan calmly purchasing 2 large hunting knives. The footage shows him carefully testing their sharpness on a piece of cardboard at the counter, demonstrating his methodical preparation for what would follow. Hassan then drove to the Bridges TV offices, parking his SUV out of view to avoid being seen. He entered the building and hid inside, waiting for Asia to arrive. His plan relied on luring her to the station under false pretenses, knowing that the protective order prevented them from being there simultaneously. The exact method Hassan used to convince Asia to come to the station remains unclear, but evidence suggests he may have told her she needed to sign documents or handle some urgent business matter. He likely assured her that he wouldn't be present, knowing she would check for his vehicle before entering. Asia arrived at the station with Michael Hassan, Muzamil's teenage son from his first marriage, and her 2 young children with Muzamil, 4-year-old Rania and 6-year-old Daniel. Michael, a high school senior, had grown close to his stepmother and often helped her with the children. The children remained in the car while Asia entered the building, expecting to handle whatever business matter Hassan had invented. Instead, she walked into an ambush that had been carefully planned and prepared. At approximately 6:15 p.m., Asia was on the phone with her sister in South Africa when the attack began. Asma heard Asia tell someone to calm down and that they could talk the following day about the divorce. Then she heard what sounded like her sister struggling to breathe before the connection ended. Inside the building, Hassan attacked Asia with the hunting knives he had purchased. The assault was brutal and prolonged. He stabbed her more than 40 times in the face, back, and chest before finally decapitating her. The violence was so extreme that it damaged the floor tiles beneath her body. Security cameras in the building captured portions of the attack, providing video evidence of the horrific crime. The entire assault lasted approximately 47 seconds, but the brutality was comprehensive and devastating. After brutally murdering his wife, Muzamal Hassan emerged from the Bridges TV building to face his teenage stepson and 2 young children who had been waiting in the car. What happened next revealed the calculated nature of his actions and his complete disconnection from the reality of what he had done. Michael Hassan, the 17-year-old son from Muzamal's first marriage, was shocked to see his father emerge from a building he wasn't supposed to be in. The teenager immediately sensed something was wrong. Hassan approached the car and handed Michael $4,900 in cash, saying cryptically, "You will probably need it." This money would later be taken as evidence by police. Michael tried to enter the locked building to check on Asia, but Hassan had secured the entrance. Growing increasingly worried, Michael attempted to call his older sister Sonia, who was a freshman at the University at Buffalo. The teenager was trapped in a nightmare situation, responsible for 2 young children, while sensing that something terrible had happened to the woman who had been like a mother to him. If you've made it this far into Asia's story, take a moment to reflect, not just on what she endured, but on how many others may be facing the same silence behind closed doors. If you believe stories like this deserve to be told and heard, please subscribe, leave a comment, and share this video with someone who needs to see it. Your voice helps bring attention to the stories that too often go unheard. At 6:20 p.m., just minutes after committing the murder, Hassan walked into the Orchard Park police station. His demeanor was calm and controlled as he approached the desk officer and made a statement that would shock the small suburban community. His wife was dead, and they could find her body at the Bridges TV offices. Officers immediately responded to the Bridges TV location, where they discovered Asia's body in a hallway. The crime scene was horrific. Her decapitated head was positioned near her body against a wall. The brutality of the murder shocked even experienced law enforcement officers who had dealt with violent crimes throughout their careers. The murder scene was carefully documented and processed. In addition to the physical evidence, investigators discovered that security cameras had captured portions of the attack, providing video evidence of Hassan's actions. The combination of his confession, the video evidence, and the physical evidence created an overwhelming case against him. Hassan was immediately arrested and charged with second-degree murder. He was arraigned before Village Justice Deborah Chimes and sent to the Erie County Holding Center, where he would remain throughout his legal proceedings. News of the murder spread quickly through the small, affluent community of Orchard Park. The town hadn't seen a homicide since 1986, and the brutal nature of this crime, combined with the high profile of the perpetrator, created shockwaves throughout Western New York. The Muslim community was devastated by the news. Bridges TV had been a source of pride and hope for Muslim Americans seeking positive representation in media. The revelation that its co-founder had murdered his wife in such a brutal manner was both personally traumatic for community members and damaging to their broader efforts at cultural bridge building. Within hours of the arrest, speculation began about whether this was an honor killing, based on the method of murder and the cultural background of those involved. This speculation would complicate the community's response and add another layer of pain to an already tragic situation. Bridges TV released a statement expressing shock and sadness over Asia's murder and Hassan's arrest. The network's board and staff faced the challenge of continuing operations while dealing with the loss of their general manager and the arrest of their CEO. The children, both Asia's biological children and Hassan's older children, were left to deal with the devastating aftermath of losing the woman who had tried to protect them all. The Orchard Park Police Department, working with the Erie County District Attorney's Office, launched a comprehensive investigation into Asia Hassan's murder. Despite Muzamil Hassan's confession and the overwhelming evidence of his guilt, investigators worked methodically to build an airtight case that would ensure justice for the victim. Detective work began at the crime scene, where forensic experts carefully documented every aspect of the murder. The position of Asia's body, the blood spatter patterns, and the damage to the floor tiles all told the story of extreme violence. The hunting knives used in the attack were recovered and processed for fingerprints and DNA evidence. The security camera footage proved to be crucial evidence. The system at Bridges TV had captured portions of the attack, providing visual documentation of Hassan's actions. This video evidence would later be shown to the jury, though its graphic nature required careful handling to ensure it was presented appropriately in court. Investigators also traced Hassan's movements on the day of the murder. The Walmart surveillance footage, showing him purchasing and testing the hunting knives, established premeditation. The timing, purchasing the weapons just over an hour before the murder, demonstrated that this was not a crime of passion but a calculated act of violence. Police records revealed the extensive history of domestic violence calls to the Hassan residence. These reports painted a picture of escalating abuse over many years and showed that multiple agencies had been aware of the dangerous situation. The documentation included 3 separate protective orders served on Hassan in 2007, 2008, and 2009. The investigation expanded to include interviews with family members, colleagues, and community leaders who had known the couple. Michael and Sonia Hassan, Muzamil's older children, provided crucial testimony about the years of abuse they had witnessed. Their accounts corroborated Asia's experiences and demonstrated the pattern of violence that had characterized Hassan's behavior across multiple relationships. Medical records were subpoenaed to document Asia's injuries over the years. Emergency room visits, doctor consultations, and photographic evidence that Asia had collected created a timeline of abuse that supported the prosecution's case. The medical examiner's report detailed the extent of her injuries on the day she died, confirming that she had been stabbed more than 40 times before being decapitated. Financial records revealed additional evidence of Hassan's controlling behavior. Bank statements showed his restriction of Asia's access to money and his use of financial control as a tool of abuse. The investigation also revealed that Hassan had hidden assets and manipulated financial records in preparation for the divorce proceedings. Communication records, including phone calls and emails, provided insight into the couple's relationship in the weeks leading up to the murder. The phone call between Asia and her sister Asma in South Africa during which the attack began, was particularly important in establishing the timeline and Hassan's actions. Investigators also examined Hassan's previous marriages to establish a pattern of domestic violence. Interviews with his former wives confirmed that both had filed for divorce, citing severe domestic violence and abuse. This pattern evidence would be crucial in demonstrating that Hassan's behavior toward Asiya was not an isolated incident, but part of a consistent pattern of violence toward intimate partners. The investigation revealed that Hassan had made several statements to different people about feeling incredible relief after killing his wife. In one particularly disturbing comment, he compared his feelings to escaping from an Al-Qaeda terrorist camp, claiming that the police station was the safest place for him. These statements demonstrated his complete lack of remorse and his distorted perception of himself as the victim. Forensic psychiatrists were brought in to evaluate Hassan's mental state, though he would later refuse to cooperate fully with psychological assessments. The evaluation process would become complicated by Hassan's decision to represent himself and his claims that he was the victim of abuse. Muzammil Hassan's first court appearance took place on February 18, 2009, before Erie County Judge Thomas Francic. The man who had once commanded respect as a successful businessman and community leader now stood before the court as an accused murderer, beginning a legal journey that would expose the full extent of his crimes and delusions. Hassan pleaded not guilty to the charge of second-degree murder, despite having confessed to police and despite overwhelming evidence of his guilt. This plea set the stage for what would become one of the most unusual and disturbing murder trials in Western New York's recent history. The legal proceedings were complicated from the beginning by Hassan's behavior and his relationship with his attorneys. He initially worked with attorney James Harrington, but it quickly became apparent that Hassan had no intention of following standard legal advice or accepting responsibility for his actions. District Attorney Frank Sedita III and Prosecutor Colleen Curtin Gable began building their case methodically. They had an overwhelming amount of evidence. The prosecution's strategy focused on establishing the premeditated nature of the murder and the pattern of abuse that led to it. However, the case took an unexpected turn when Hassan began claiming that he was actually the victim of abuse. This defense strategy represented a complete reversal of reality that would characterize Hassan's behavior throughout the legal proceedings. In September 2010, Hassan's legal team received permission from Judge Francic to present evidence of battered spouse syndrome. The defense claimed that Hassan had suffered from years of abuse at the hands of Asiya and that his actions on February 12, 2009, were the result of his psychological state as a victim of domestic violence. The defense team brought in expert witnesses, including Buffalo forensic psychiatrist Ana Natasha Cervantes and Syracuse psychologist Kenneth Corvo, who were prepared to testify about Hassan's alleged victimization. The prosecution countered with extensive evidence of Hassan's violence, including photographs of Asiya's injuries and testimony from multiple witnesses. Throughout these proceedings, Hassan demonstrated increasingly erratic behavior. During one court appearance, he repeatedly referred to Judge Francic as a voodoo judge and had to be physically dragged into and out of the courtroom. This behavior suggested either genuine mental health issues or a calculated attempt to create grounds for appeal. The legal proceedings were further complicated by delays and changes in representation. Hassan fired multiple attorneys, creating frustration for the court and additional trauma for the victims' families who were eager to see justice served. By late 2010, it became clear that Hassan was considering representing himself in court, a decision that would add another layer of complexity to an already unusual case. Self-representation in a murder trial is extremely rare and generally inadvisable, but defendants have the constitutional right to represent themselves if they are found competent to do so. The prosecution team prepared for the possibility that Hassan would represent himself. knowing that this would create additional challenges in presenting their case while ensuring that Hassan's rights were protected. They also had to consider how Hassan's self-representation might affect the jury and whether his behavior in court would help or hurt their case. As 2010 drew to a close, all parties prepared for what would be an unprecedented trial, featuring a defendant who claimed to be the victim of the woman he had brutally murdered. In January 2011, nearly 2 years after Asiya Hassan's murder, the trial of Muzammil Hassan finally began in Buffalo. What followed was one of the most unusual and disturbing murder trials in recent memory, featuring a defendant who represented himself while claiming to be the victim of the woman he had brutally killed. Hassan had ultimately fired 4 different attorneys before deciding to represent himself, keeping his final attorney as a legal advisor as required by law. This decision meant that Hassan would personally cross-examine witnesses, present his own defense, and address the jury directly, a scenario that created both legal and emotional challenges for everyone involved. Judge Thomas Franchik presided over the proceedings with careful attention to ensuring that Hassan's constitutional rights were protected while also managing his disruptive behavior. The judge had already witnessed Hassan's erratic conduct during pretrial hearings and was prepared for a difficult trial. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Frank Sedita and Prosecutor Colleen Curtin-Gable, presented their case systematically. They began by establishing the facts of the murder itself: Hassan's purchase of the hunting knives, his premeditated plan to lure Asiya to the television station, and the brutal attack that followed. The security camera footage from Bridges TV was shown to the jury, providing graphic visual evidence of Hassan's actions. The video was difficult to watch and clearly demonstrated the calculated nature of the attack. Forensic evidence, including blood spatter analysis and the condition of the crime scene, supported the prosecution's case that this was a premeditated murder, not a spontaneous act of violence. The prosecution then presented extensive evidence of Hassan's pattern of domestic violence. Medical records documented Asiya's injuries over the years, including photographs she had taken of bruises and other evidence of abuse. Police reports from multiple domestic violence incidents created a timeline of escalating violence. Most powerfully, Hassan's own children testified against him. Michael and Sonia Hassan, now young adults, took the witness stand to describe years of witnessing their father's abuse of their stepmother. Their testimony was emotionally devastating and provided first-hand accounts of Hassan's violent behavior from people who had lived in the household. Sonia Hassan's testimony was particularly moving as she described how Asiya had saved money for an entire year to buy her a professional trumpet, demonstrating love and sacrifice despite the abuse she was enduring. Michael Hassan testified about the fear that permeated their household and his unsuccessful attempts to protect his stepmother. The prosecution also presented evidence of Hassan's previous marriages and the domestic violence that had characterized both relationships. This pattern evidence showed that Hassan's abuse of Asiya was not an isolated incident, but part of a consistent pattern of violence toward intimate partners. When it came time for Hassan to present his defense, the courtroom witnessed a surreal spectacle. Hassan maintained that he was the victim of abuse and that Asiya had physically and emotionally terrorized him throughout their marriage. He claimed that she had threatened him with knives and that he feared for his life on the night of the murder. Hassan's defense was not only factually unsupported, but deeply offensive to those who understood the reality of domestic violence. He attempted to portray himself as a battered spouse while ignoring the overwhelming evidence of his own violence. His claims were contradicted by medical evidence, witness testimony, and his own documented behavior. The defendant's decision to represent himself backfired spectacularly. His questions to witnesses were often inappropriate or irrelevant, and his arguments to the jury lacked any basis in evidence or law. His behavior in court reinforced the prosecution's portrayal of him as a narcissistic individual who refused to accept responsibility for his actions. Throughout the trial, Hassan showed no remorse for his actions and no empathy for his victims. His demeanor was cold and calculating, supporting the prosecution's argument that he was a dangerous individual who had planned and executed his wife's murder. After 3 weeks of testimony, the case went to the jury on February 7, 2011. The deliberation was remarkably brief, just 1 hour, before the jury returned with their verdict: guilty of second-degree murder. On March 9, 2011, Muzammil Hassan faced Judge Thomas Francic for sentencing in what would be the final chapter of his legal proceedings. When it came time for sentencing, the judge's words reflected both the severity of the crime and his assessment of Hassan's character. You bought 2 hunting knives, you tested them for sharpness, you laid in wait in a darkened hallway for your unsuspecting wife, and you destroyed her. Judge Francic continued his assessment. Justice demands that you receive nothing less than the maximum possible sentence. He sentenced Hassan to 25 years to life in prison, the maximum penalty available under New York state law for second-degree murder. District Attorney Frank Sadia emphasized that Hassan would not be eligible for parole for 25 years and that the chances of him getting out before his sentence is completed is not going to happen. This statement provided some measure of comfort to Hassan's victims and their families. The judge granted prosecutors' request that Hassan be barred from contacting his 2 oldest children, Michael and Sonia. These young adults had testified against their father and had made clear that they wanted no further contact with him. The protective order ensured that they could rebuild their lives without fear of harassment or manipulation. Hassan's brief statement at sentencing revealed no genuine remorse or acceptance of responsibility. "I deeply regret that things came down to what they came down to," he said. "I truly wish there would have been some alternative mechanism." His words suggested regret about the consequences he faced rather than genuine sorrow for his victim. The sentence meant that Hassan would spend the remainder of his productive adult life in prison. At 46 years old at the time of sentencing, he would be at least 71 before becoming eligible for parole, assuming he ever qualified for release, which legal experts considered unlikely given the nature of his crime and his lack of remorse. Hassan was transferred to Clinton Correctional Facility in Dannemora, New York, a maximum security prison in the Adirondack Mountains. The facility, known as Little Siberia due to its remote location and harsh conditions, would be his home for the foreseeable future. The sentencing brought some measure of closure to Hassan's victims and their families. Michael and Sonia Hassan could begin rebuilding their lives without the fear of their father's influence. If Asia's story moved you, don't let it end here. Share this video. Talk about it. Break the silence. And if you or someone you know is facing abuse, please know, help is out there, and you are not alone. Subscribe to this channel to hear more stories that matter, because remembering Asia means standing up for others before it's too late.